As the curtain of secrecy has been pulled back, a sleek silver bullet has emerged from the shadows after 6 years of intensive development. NASA and Lockheed Martin have finally unveiled their revolutionary, silent, supersonic aircraft, the X-59 Quest. Edge Marvel is about to break the sound barrier and redefine the skies with its groundbreaking technology. The X-59 promises to make supersonic passenger flight a reality. But what innovative features does it bring to the table, and when can we expect to experience the thrill of supersonic travel? Welcome to a brand new video. Let's explore how NASA has finally unveiled the silent X-59 supersonic aircraft, the Sonic Boom. If you like this kind of content, subscribe to our channel. It's free. Now let's get started. Sonic boom is a phenomenon that has long been the Achilles heel of supersonic flight. When an aircraft travels faster than the speed of sound, it produces compressed air molecules against the body of the aircraft, the shock waves that merge to form the sonic boom. Sonic booms generate enormous amounts of sound energy that sound similar to an explosion or thunder to the human ear. Sonic booms are often compared to the crack of a supersonic bullet or the crack of a whip, but on a much larger scale. When a supersonic aircraft breaks the sound barrier, it produces a loud, startling noise that can wake people and even cause minor damage to structures. This led to a ban on routine supersonic flights over land. However, research suggests that with careful design and shaping of the vehicle, the nuisance of sonic booms can be significantly reduced, making supersonic flight over land a more viable option. It is important to note that sonic booms do not occur only when an object crosses the sound barrier and instead are not heard in all directions. The boom is a continuous effect that occurs while the object is traveling at supersonic speeds and affects only observers within a specific region behind the object. This region takes the form of a geometric cone that moves behind the object as it travels. When the cone passes over an observer, they will briefly experience the sonic boom. By understanding the dynamics of sonic booms, researchers and engineers can work to mitigate their impact and make supersonic flight more accessible. When an aircraft moves through the air, it generates a series of pressure waves both in front of and behind it. Similar to the bow and stern waves created by a ship, these waves travel at the speed of sound, and as the aircraft's speed increases, they become compressed because they cannot move away from each other quickly enough. Eventually, these waves merge into a single crash. The wave traveling at the speed of sound, a critical speed known as Mach 1, is approximately 1,192 km per h at sea level and 20 degrees C in steady flight. The shock wave starts at the nose of the aircraft and ends at its tail due to the symmetry. During the aircraft's motion, the shock wave forms a simulated cone similar to a vapor cone with the aircraft at its tip. This cone-shaped shockwave is a key aspect of supersonic flight and is responsible for the sonic boom produced when an aircraft breaks the sound barrier. The plane is traveling faster. Its shock cone becomes thinner and more pointed. The pressure distribution around the plane changes, creating an overpressure profile known as an N wave. This N wave causes a distinctive double boom as the plane breaks the sound barrier. And when the plane is maneuvering, the pressure distribution changes to a U-wave shape, which is amplified 2 to 5 times the N wave. However, this amplified overpressure only affects a small area compared to the rest of the sonic boom. The strength of the sonic boom depends on altitude, speed, and the size of the overpressure peak. It can range from less than 50 to 500 pascals for a wave boom. The loudest sonic boom ever recorded was 7,000 pascals, but caused no injuries to researchers. Buildings in good condition can withstand pressures of 530 pascals or less without damage. Community exposure to sonic booms is typically ground motion below 100 pascals due to sonic booms. This is rare and well below structural damage thresholds. The power of the shockwave depends on the amount of air being accelerated, so larger aircraft produce stronger shocks. However, at very high speeds and altitudes, the shock cone becomes weaker and no boom is heard. The length of the boom depends on the length of the aircraft. Longer aircraft produce a less powerful boom. Secondary shock waves can form at convex points on the aircraft, such as the leading edge of the wing and engine inlets. These shock waves add to the main shock. The wave maximizes its magnitude and rise time, making the boom appear louder. The characteristic distance for this effect is around 4,000 feet, below which the sonic boom becomes milder. However, sonic travel at this altitude is inefficient because drag poses a major problem. So how do supersonic aircraft work? Supersonic aircraft. It has been established that supersonic aircraft are capable of flying faster than the speed of sound, which is Mach 1. These aircraft can reach speeds of up to 5 times Mach 1 or Mach 5. The typical speed range for supersonic aircraft is between 700 and 1,500 miles per hour. Since most aircraft do not exceed 1,500 miles per hour, there are several types of supersonic aircraft, each with its unique design approach. Some models prioritize aerodynamics and sacrifice some of the power of the propellers to improve airflow. Others rely on powerful thrusters to compensate for less aerodynamic designs that achieve higher speeds. In the United States, supersonic military aircraft can cost between $13 million and $35 million depending on the model and its capabilities. These high-performance aircraft require careful design and engineering to achieve supersonic speeds while maintaining stability and control. Their advanced design and powerful engines make them valuable assets for military and research applications. The pressure generated by aircraft sonic booms is typically in the range of a few pounds per square foot. However, the intensity of the pressure decreases as the altitude of the vehicle increases. This is because the shock is dissipated and spread farther away from the vehicle, resulting in lower ground pressures. Interestingly, the speed of the vehicle has a minimal impact on the sonic boom pressure, while the speed of the vehicle affects the intensity of the shock wave. The pressure on the ground remains relatively constant. This means that even if an aircraft is traveling at a high speed, the sonic boom pressure on the ground will be similar to that of an aircraft traveling at a slower speed, but at a lower altitude. Concorde, the famous popular supersonic passenger aircraft. By the late 1950s, supersonic transport designs were being developed, and it was thought that flying higher would avoid sonic boom problems. However, the first flight of the North American XP-70 Valkyrie proved this assumption to be wrong and showed that boom was still a problem even at 70,000 feet, leading to the characterization of the N-wave and the development of a figure by Richard Cass and Albert George to measure sonic boom levels. The FMS being based on the weight and length of the aircraft, with lower values indicating less boom. Using this calculation, the Concorde and Boeing 2707 were found to have FMS of 1.4 and 1.9 respectively, which were considered too high. Combined with public resentment and political factors, led to the demise of most projects. However, smaller aircraft designs such as commercial jets tend to produce minimal or no audible booms. Building on previous research, George and Christine M. Darden developed the Jones, George, and Darden theory of sonic boom minimization. It aims to spread the wave laterally and temporally by using a sharp, high-angle nose cone and a swept-back or obliquely swept flying wing to soften the shock wave. This approach can raise the jet altitude from 40,000 to 60,000 feet, making it suitable for SST aircraft. The area rule is also used to shape the fuselage to reduce the intensity of the shock wave. For decades, the theory of sonic boom minimization remained unproven until DARPA initiated the Quiet Supersonic Platform project and funded the sonic boom-shaped demonstrator aircraft. The SSBD modified an F-5 Freedom Fighter with a refined shape that lengthened the nose and added a fairing to reduce the intensity of the sonic boom. After 21 flights and 1,300 recordings, the SSBD demonstrated a one-third reduction in boom intensity, a promising result that may have made the Concorde's boom acceptable after the SSBD, NASA, and Gulfstream Aerospace tested the quiet spike on an F-15B aircraft in 2006. The quiet spike is a telescopic arm that weakens shock waves in the nose of the aircraft at supersonic speeds. More than 50 test flights were conducted, including probing of the shock waves by a second F-15B. While some theoretical designs, such as the Boozman biplane, intended to eliminate the sonic booms that generate aerodynamic lift that inevitably creates shock waves. In 2018, NASA awarded Lockheed Martin a $247.5 million contract to build the low-boom flight demonstrator, with the goal of reducing the sonic boom to the sound of a car door closing. The sound of the boom depends largely on the distance between the observer and the aircraft, the shape that produces the sonic boom. A sonic boom is usually heard as a deep double boom, as the aircraft is usually some distance away. The sound is much like that of mortar bombs commonly used in fireworks. It is a common misconception that only one boom is generated during the subsonic to supersonic transition, and that the boom is continuous. During the entire supersonic flight, a former Concorde pilot explains that on board there is no audible sound, but instead, the crew sees the pressure wave moving down the aircraft, indicated by the instruments. Particularly around Mach 1, the sonic boom is not heard similar to how a ship's wake is left behind. In 1964, NASA and the Federal Aviation Administration began boom sonic testing in Oklahoma City, which caused 8 sonic booms. Over 6 months, valuable data was collected from the experiment, but it generated 15,000 complaints that eventually entangled the government in a class action lawsuit, which it lost on appeal in 1969. Sonic booms were also a nuisance in North Cornwall and North Devon in the UK, as these areas under the flight path of Concorde windows would vibrate, and in some cases, torches pointing under roof tiles would be dislodged by the vibration. Recent work has been done in this area, notably under DARPA's Silent Supersonic platform. Research by acoustics experts was initiated under this program, looking more closely at the composition of sonic booms, including the frequency content. Several characteristics of the traditional sonic boom wave can influence how loud and irritating they may be perceived by listeners on the ground. Even strong N waves, such as those generated by Concorde or military aircraft, can be much less objectionable if the overpressure rise time is sufficiently long. A new metric has emerged known as perceived loudness measured in PLB. This takes into account the rise time of the frequency content. A well-known example is the finger snap, where the perceived sound is nothing more than an annoyance. Depending on the altitude of the aircraft, sonic booms reach the ground between 2 and 60 seconds after the flyby. However, not all booms are heard at ground level. The speed of sound at any altitude is a function of either decreasing or increasing air temperature. Under standard atmospheric conditions, the air temperature decreases with increasing altitude. For example, when the temperature at sea level is 15 degrees, the temperature at 30,000 feet drops to minus 45 degrees C. This temperature gradient helps bend sound waves upward, therefore, for a boom to reach the ground. The speed of the aircraft relative to the ground must be greater than the speed of sound at the ground. For example, the speed of sound at 30,000 feet is about 670 m per hour, but an aircraft must be traveling at least 750 miles per hour for a boom to be heard on the ground. The composition of the atmosphere is also a factor. Temperature variations, humidity, air pollution, and winds can all affect how a sonic boom is perceived on the ground. Even the ground itself can influence the sound of a sonic boom. Hard surfaces, such as concrete pavement and large buildings, can cause reflections that can amplify the sound of a sonic boom. Similarly, grassy fields and deep foliage can help to attenuate the force of a sonic boom's overpressure. There are currently no industry-accepted standards for the acceptability of a sonic boom. However, work is underway to create metrics to help understand how humans respond to the noise generated by sonic booms. Until such metrics can be established through additional studies or supersonic flyby testing, it is doubtful that legislation will be enacted to remove the current ban on supersonic flybys in place in several countries, including the United States. How did the Concorde ban affect transportation development? The world's fastest passenger jet, and arguably the most iconic of all time, the Concorde gave passengers a taste of supersonic flight. For nearly 3 decades, its speed was a boon to many wealthy and busy business travelers who enjoyed the short hop over the Atlantic and the transport of important cargo, such as supplies and organs for transplants during medical emergencies, with a top speed of up to 1,354 miles per hour. The supersonic jet could make the transatlantic trip between London and New York in about 3 hours. For many who flew the Concorde and experienced such speed was a momentous occasion. However, that same speed was not welcomed by people on the ground, leading to some countries banning supersonic flight. Even before the Concorde took to the skies commercially, there were voices of dissent against its environmental consequences. In 1966, British environmental activist Richard Wiggs founded the Anti-Concorde Project, which challenged the idea of any supersonic transport aircraft. Booms from the sonic tests led up to the Concorde's first test flight, often scaring people and causing windows to shatter to highlight the long-term effects of a supersonic aircraft. Companies used mass media advertising campaigns, including full-page advertisements in the national press. They claimed that the Concorde affected the ozone layer and drew attention to its noise levels. By the time the Concorde was launched, many countries were convinced that the aircraft was not a good choice for flying over land and was suitable for supersonic flight only over water, leaving few options for Concorde's potential customers with regard to network expansion, using the aircraft that the sonic boom produced. When the aircraft broke the sound barrier, it sparked numerous protests at airports and pickets on some runways. In 1972, when the aircraft landed at Sydney Airport, it was met by a group of protesters calling for the Concorde to be banned from the region. Concorde began scheduled flights on January 21, 1976, and shortly thereafter, the US Congress banned the aircraft from landing on the territory due to citizen protests and concerns about noise pollution. On March 11, 1976, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey banned Concorde from landing at JFK Airport, protests having begun a year before the official ban, when around 2,000 cars brought traffic to a standstill near the airport. Concorde's opposition claimed that the aircraft was the loudest aircraft in service and would counteract all efforts to ensure stricter noise standards which British Airways and Air France encountered. The ban was unfounded and a lawsuit was filed in 1977. In August 1977, a district court judge in New York found the ban to be discriminatory and unfair and allowed Concorde test landings within the next 10 days. In October 1977, the Supreme Court finally lifted the ban, stating that the Port Authority was holding up its fare with the ban not based on any precise noise requirement. The U.S. Secretary of Transportation allowed Concorde to operate flights to Washington Dulles International Airport. However, Air France discontinued its service to the airport in 1982, while British Airways did so in 1994 due to low demand. Before the US ban was lifted and slots were granted at JFK, both Air France and British Airways began looking for other destinations to use their new Concordes. Each wanted to deploy the supersonic airliner between London and Sydney and was looking for a stopover in the city to refuel. Singapore seemed a suitable choice. The airline was already operating a 3 times weekly service to Bahrain, so it extended the service to Singapore as a next stop. However, the flight to Singapore met with massive opposition in Malaysia due to the aircraft's supersonic boom. The service had to be stopped after just 3 flights. Crossing India to reach Singapore was also a suitable option, but that country refused to allow the aircraft to fly at supersonic speed over its airspace. However, many believe that the real reason Malaysia and India denied the Concorde entry was political, as both countries were trying to gain essential slots in London. Another route to Singapore was eventually discovered, but it was so fuel-hungry that service ended on the 1st of November. UDI claimed unprofitable operations. However, the aircraft continued to fly for over 2 decades before ceasing operations in 2003 with a final flight between London and New York. The Concorde had a maximum cruise speed of 2,179 kf or Mach 2.04, more than twice the speed of sound, allowing the aircraft to reduce flight time between London and New York to about 3 hours. So it is not surprising that the US Defense and Lockheed Martin are trying to find a solution to this sonic boom. We've reached the end of this video. Tell us what you think in the comments box. If you liked the video, give it a like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss future videos like this one. See you next time.